should be the things that are at the very top of his agenda, not the long-running challenges that are always going to be there, but the things that he ought to really start working on right away? What are the most urgent of the challenges? And Minister Sri Mulyani, I'd like to start with you. What are your top priorities that ought to be carried out at the World Bank right now?
Okay. First, his understanding about the World Bank need to be updated, because I think David knows World Bank, especially in his previous experience, 1980s. The bank changed quite dramatically in terms of the business model, the way they work. I joined the bank when the president was Bob Zulik, and Bob tried to create a lot of reform within the bank to be more agile, to be more responsive, discussing about corruption, transparency, democratizing of the data. I think that created quite a lot of change. And then Jim Kim came with quite a lot of dramatic change within the bank on the business model, the way we organize between global practice and country operation, and how we are going to work as a one World Bank group. So I think for the new president, first he has to know what is exactly now the bank doing. And it's not difficult, because he engaged in this capital increase, and he knows there is a forward look discussion within the bank, so he can really start very quickly. And I think also reflected in the way he addressed a lot of questions coming from the board during his interview or during his recruitment in this case. So that is going to be the first thing that he could do. The second one, he has a very specific issue that he, with the background of as an economist, which is different from the previous president. Definitely he's going to have a much more interest as well as engagement on a country issue, which is more on the country program. So the question in this case, how he's going to make sure that the bank operation in the country, the promise of the bank with the capital increase last time is actually we are going to serve all clients. And all clients means not only low income country, fragile state, which is I think that's popular, small country, island country, but I think one of the most important issue that everybody will watch is how the new president is going to deal with the middle income country, especially China, because this is going to be whether he's going to reflecting the voice of US government or he's going to be the president of the bank of 189 countries. That is going to be the most important, maybe first step that he's going to decide. And that will be reflecting in the country partnership program that the bank is going to discuss with the board. The third is, I think, on issue. In the past, like Bob Zulik is really have a specific issue which he really interested and have a strong passion. For example, corruption and transparency on the data. Jim Kim has human capital, climate change. So the question, what is going to be his very specific individual passion that he's going to pursue? And maybe this is going to be, I don't know, it's going to be about Gini coefficient, inequality, or it's about the country that need to grow optimally with less intervention, or he's going to be more on a twin goal, just like Jim Kim. We will see. That is going to be one thing that he's going to decide, because that kind of signal will says a lot internally within the bank to all the staff, but also to the client. The bank is not value free. I think the presidents always have huge influence in terms of shaping the program and engagement with the client. So when President Zulik at that time really emphasizing a lot of corruption, transparency, data, which I love. So I love to engage with country and saying that corruption is important, although in the past you should not address the issue of corruption, it's not appropriate, politically incorrect, and blah, blah, blah. But I think that's important for country. I was client and I love to have somebody or a bank who get engaged and scrutinizing about corruption. Because sometimes the country is already hijacked with elite capture, so you need something from outside to actually addressing this issue. Now, Jim Kim have human capital, climate change, or pandemic at that time. So the question is, what is going to be this new president? And I will personally see that the global public good is going to be one which is still continuing important. So climate change is going to be important, and of course how the bank can work with all clients that is unique bank, because we as a client, in this case I'm now become a client again of the bank, I always have a choices. I have ADB, I have AIIB, even European Investment Bank will now want to operate in Indonesia, and I have the World Bank. So what is the difference between all those multilateral institutions for us? And I will see that the World Bank should have a more comparative advantage because they are bank for the world. That means that they have more knowledge and experience reflecting more or less the rich experience of different clients. So I as a client can then ask the bank, if I now need to reform my tax department, is there any knowledge that I can get not only from Asia but from the world, so that I can get the best lesson? If I'm having an address of social safety net, what should I do? Which country who actually have a best experience and design? If I'm now addressing the issue of stunting, what should I do in this case? So I can really rely on the bank as a both knowledge bank who has all client set and have a global experience. It's not become a regional bank. So I don't want to see the bank to then focus only on the low income country fragile state. That is going to like constraining the institution who's supposed to be able to have a huge asset operating globally and have the ability to accumulate knowledge and have an experience globally. That is going to be also creating a good public good for all clients as well as shareholders. My last comment is how long I can speak in this? I can speak for 1 hour. Okay. So my last point is actually the shareholder. I think this is a very unique situation in the bank. We assume the bank as the multilateral institution that the shareholders believe in the multilateralism. And today, this has become a question mark. Is all the shareholders really believe that we still need multilateralism and multilateral institution? Because if the shareholder, especially the major shareholder, they don't have the clear idea, the clear objective of having this institution, you just like putting in the analogy of corporation. If your shareholder is confused and fuzzy, then the performance of the corporation is going to be also confusing. It's going to be suboptimal. So the question for all of us is the shareholder is actually still believe in this system and institution, and whether this institution and system is going to achieve the goal, whether we are talking about my dream is the world without poverty or twin goal. That is maybe the bottom line question, because I firmly believe that any institution, if you are not consistent between governance as well as business model, resources, then you are going to have a problem within this consistency between these three: governance, business model, and resources. So if the bank have to do something, then these three things need to be consistent first before they are going to do all the good thing for the world.
So we're going to come back to quite a number of those topics actually, but first I do want to go down the line to let the other panelists have an opportunity, if there's anything that they also want to see right at the very top of David Malpass's agenda, or kind of any introductory observations that they want to make. So Nicholas, we'll go next to you. Do you have anything that you would add as the high priority items right now?
Yes. I think at the beginning of can you hear me in the back, Ollie? Very good. Step one. At the first 100 days or whatever it might be, you want to have some clarity of the strategy of the institution. What is it you're trying to pursue? If you want to put a strategy together, you need three things. One is an understanding of the objective. Second is an understanding of the comparative advantage of your institution. And thirdly, an understanding of the world in which you are operating. Those are the three basic elements in putting a strategy together. Let me say a word or two about each of them. What are the objectives? Well, the countries of the world have spoken. We had the Sustainable Development Goals of September 2015. More than 190 countries are subscribing to those. And we have the Paris Agreement on climate change of December 2015. If you ask what is the set of objectives you're working on, well, they're there. The countries, which of course include all the shareholders of the World Bank, have said what they are. And that's what the World Bank, the global institution, should pursue. So I think at the beginning, if I understand it correctly, he's begun to be explicit about that. Some of us were worried that he would be. He seems to have said it, but let's be absolutely crystal clear that that is what we mean by the objectives. And once we've said that, we have to be clear about the urgency and scale that follows from those objectives. I can't go into any detail, but let me just give you two numbers that illustrate urgency and scale. The world economy doubles in about 20 years at a growth rate slightly above 3%, the ballpark of what it's likely to be. In that 20 years, we have to reduce overall emissions by about 40%, just for the 2-degree thing. Put the 1.5 one side, it's obviously stronger, but 1.5. So if you put a new economy side by side with the old one, and that doubles, and that new economy is zero emissions, that's not good enough. We've got to cut by 40% overall. So it shows the urgency and scale. The next 2 decades are decisive in terms of what we're able to do. And of course, the Sustainable Development Goals, the word sustainable very important there, involve upping action in key areas right across, whether it's education or health or whatever. And the IMF, I understand, and the World Bank are about to come out with some numbers on exactly that. So the agenda is clear, but also the understanding of the urgency and scale that's involved in that agenda. This is no time for cutting back. This is a time for increasing the activity and increasing the multipliers, so that public to private, both. So what is the comparative advantage of the NDBs and the World Bank in particular? Well, they're very, very powerful, those advantages, and they follow from the structure and design of the institutions. Big multipliers from paid-in capital to callable capital, which we should be using in relation to the scale of the problem. Big multipliers in relation to the contribution on policy and institutions, which can translate, if they improve, translate these wonderful investment opportunities into real programs and projects. That's a second big multiplier. The World Bank, like other NDBs, has very strong convening power. It can pull parties together. Risk management is absolutely at the heart of what it does. The presence of a multilateral institution in the deal can actually reduce the risk drastically. When I was at the EBRD as chief economist, we had some companies that actually at that moment could have bought the EBRD. They still wanted the EBRD in the deal because they recognized that the presence of the EBRD in the deal reduced the overall policy risk in the project. So the presence reduces risk. They have instruments for managing risk, like through guarantees, and the World Bank Group is organized well, so the all parts come together. You've got guarantees with MEGA, you've got equity in IFC, you've got the long-term loans of the World Bank, and then you've got the trust funds. You can put those all together in a way that really distributes the risk and shares the risk. And all these things is not subsidy. All these things follow from the characteristics of the institution, shareholding structure, and the instruments at its disposal. So that's a very special set of comparative advantages which have to be used to rise to the scale and urgency of the problem. So there's expansion in the lending, and also big expansion in the multiplier. Finally, what kind of world do we live in, and how does that influence the allocation of the World Bank's activities across different parts of the world? And I fully agree with what Sri Mulyani just said, but let me express it this way. The allocation across countries is absolutely not a zero-sum game. For long, the British Foreign Office, and it's a characteristic of diplomats in general, they see the world as a zero-sum game, and the British Foreign Office used to see the Africanists think that the Asianists were in conspiracy and vice versa against them. This is not a zero-sum game. Why not? Well, the future of Africa depends in large measure on infrastructure investment in Asia. That's what's really going to shape, because there are the biggest numbers in shaping what's happening to climate. The second, it's not a zero-sum game. The links now, the infrastructure links across the world are increasingly important. When I was writing the report for Commission for Africa, that's 13, 14 years ago now, we had a map of the infrastructure routes, and they were largely extractive industries out into Europe. The world has changed, and those infrastructure links are going to be extremely important. The World Bank, the third reason it's not a zero-sum game, is that the examples, the World Bank has to be on the frontier, that's its duty because of all its advantages, but the frontier examples it brings to the table, developed in one country, have tremendous advantages in other countries. And people in this room could give countless examples of how a really strong program and project and set of policies in one place, which worked, you don't multiply the ones that didn't work, but the ones that do work, you can multiply and take elsewhere. Again, it's not a zero-sum game. And finally, and importantly, the profits that are made in the middle-income countries make a very important contribution to the ability to respond more strongly in the more difficult, lower-income, fragile countries. 4 ways. None of those ways is marginal. Together, it's very powerful. So I'm right with Sri Mulyani. The World Bank should be looking across the world, asking about its impact, but doing it in a way that recognizes that the activities in one place are highly complementary with activities in other places, and it's not a fight between how much you put here and how much you put there. It's wise judgment on the combination.
Manoush, what would you add?
I made myself a list of do's and don'ts for future World Bank president based on past experience of what has not worked so well and a sense of what is needed at the moment. So I'll start with the don'ts. First don't is don't do a reorganization. You will lose huge amounts of time, goodwill, and fiddling with the organogram will achieve nothing. So that's advice number 1. Number 2 is don't behave like an outsider and badmouth the organization internally and externally for the first year. You own it. 3, don't waste time coming up with a new set of priorities when the whole world has endorsed the Sustainable Development Goals. So you've got a clear sense of priorities, and I completely agree with Nick on that. And then the 4th don't is don't crowd out the private sector or try to be like the IMF just to use up spare balance sheet capacity. So those are my don'ts, but then let me turn to my do's. The first do is global public goods are probably the only remaining unique comparative advantage of the World Bank. When I first joined the World Bank, it was a virtual monopoly in terms of both financing and knowledge transfer to developing countries. That is so far from the current reality, it's unimaginable. The only thing that the bank we can really say is uniquely positioned to do is around global public goods. And so climate, pandemics, all that set of issues really has to be at the center.